Hello, my name is Jim Moltzen. I've been trying to do a lot of educational videos regarding Qigong, Tai Chi, and martial arts methods that can improve your health and wellness. So to elaborate on what I've been talking about in the last few videos regarding being able to move the body in the three anatomical planes, I'm going to try to demonstrate a few other exercises that you can utilize to get that mobility that I've been speaking about. So just to refresh, we have the three planes of movement. The coronal plane would be the surface that's kind of flat with our shoulders, moving the arms side to side in this direction, moving the legs side to side. That's all moving within the coronal plane. The next one would be the sagittal plane, and that's the plane that divides our body from left to right, kind of like a wheel. And those would be the movements where we're going forward or backward, lifting the leg in front, lifting the leg in back. Anything that's doing movement in a forward or backward movement would be within the sagittal plane. The third plane of mobility would be the transverse plane. And that's the plane that's parallel with the ground, which our spine and the axis of our body would rotate from side to side. We also have movements where we would turn the shoulder joint within that transverse plane. Even though it's not parallel to the ground, it's perpendicular to the movement. So we have that type of movement with our shoulders being a ball and socket joint. We also have the hip being able to move the leg within that transverse plane to rotate to rotate on its center of axis. So let's move on to the next thing. Why is it important, once again, to be able to move within the three planes of motion? Because if we don't have that side-to-side motion, the forward motion, the ability to twist and turn, it affects many different things within our body, one being our balance and our equilibrium. If one side is too tight or injured, then when it comes time to adjust our balance, sometimes we're at a loss to be able to do that because the body doesn't move comfortably within those directions. So also what happens is we start to lift heavy objects thinking that we're young, and we turn our body into that transverse plane, and consequently we end up straining our back muscles because the back, for the most part, is used to going forward and backward. And sometimes we do side-to-side movements, and then we enter into this type of movement where we go side to side and twisting, and that's usually the weakest position for most people. So to alleviate that, what we try to do is exercises that get us moving into those three planes. Instead of thinking like, okay, I'm going to go and work today just in the sagittal plane, going forward and backward, or I'm just going to work on doing the side bends, going this way, and try to get that flexibility. What these exercises are designed to do is to get you moving in all three of those planes at the same time or throughout the motion of the exercise. So let me explain. If we were going to do one here, I start with my feet together, my body somewhat neutral, and then I sink down. I bring my arm up. My arm and my leg are moving in that frontal plane, not the frontal plane, the sagittal plane, from left to right. From here, I put the leg out, and then I shift my weight across. So that's giving us the side-to-side motion, moving in that coronal plane of mobility. From here, I can also turn my spine, winding it up like a spring. That's moving in that transverse plane. So that's giving us the mobility of moving our body side to side, some forward movement with our arm, our shoulder, our hip movement, and then also twisting of the spine on its vertical axis. So that's one type of movement that will get us to move in the three planes. Another type of movement would be from here, if I would draw back into what's called a bow stance, where one knee is bent directly over my ankle, the other leg is locked, drawing backward, and the back foot turns on a 45-degree angle. This gives us somewhat of a triangular stance where we have a lot of stability to move forward and backward. So again, that is going to be that's the sagittal plane, moving forward and backward. You also see that in activities such as running, walking, swimming to some degree, hiking. It's that forward movement and backward. So that's great, but we also want to be able to move with that side twisting, the lateral movement of our spine. So say I shift my weight forward and then back. As I'm going to do this, each time when I shift back, I turn my torso from my center of gravity to my right side. When I come back forward, I release the tension and let the spine turn back towards the direction that my feet are facing. So that gets us the sagittal plane going forward and backward, gets us the transverse plane twisting laterally side to side. The next thing to add would be the arm movement. So I'm going to move my arm in a circular movement, like I'm painting on a wall in front of my body. So that gets us movement in the coronal plane. So forward and backward is the hips and the legs. Twisting side to side is the spine, the transverse plane. The arms circling on the front plane being the coronal plane. My other hand can rest on my hip right now. When I get this motion going, I have 3 planes of movement. And what this also starts to do is create somewhat of a pumping motion, starting with the feet, pushing into the hips, directing with the waist, expressing with the shoulders and arms. So this type of pumping motion is what we call the tourniquet effect, where we kind of stop the blood flow and the energy flow in one part of the body, and then release the tension, lets the blood and energy flow much more rapidly at that point. So we have the 3 planes of movement. We have the tourniquet effect, pumping the blood and energy throughout the body, which helps the heart. The heart is one of the methods that the blood circulates. The other is with our breath, moving our diaphragm for deep breaths, and pumping from the feet. The ankles into the calves, that's also a way to pump the blood and energy throughout the body. So another thing we start to have going on here is what's called kinetic linking. And that's where I start with one part of the body, and then I go on to the next part, and to the next part, and the body starts to pick up some momentum or speed. And that's more relative to self-defense techniques, where you try to generate power in order to defend yourself or to overcome some challenge where you need that extra strength. So if I was going to do the kinetic linking part of the movement, I'm drawing the pressure on my feet, pushing into the ground, helps get the hips to move. So my hips move, then the arms and the shoulder come along at the end, kind of like a whipping motion. So for the most part, when I practice this, it's kind of slow and relaxed. And that's good for, just general flexibility and strength in the body and coordination. But when I add the speed, that starts to generate some force when it comes to being able to extend and move the body. Again, we get that whipping motion. But it's actually coming from the feet. The feet initiate the movement, pushing into the ground, pushing to the hips, directing the hips by turning the torso, and unleashing or manifesting in the movement of the arms and the hands. So with all these movements, we have to practice them on both sides. So again, that's that stability, the balance of the body, top and bottom, left and right, front and back, in and out. So again, the same movement on the other side. I got my knee over my foot, front foot facing directly from my body, back foot turns on an angle. And I start to shift back and forth, just that forward and backward movement. If that's fine, I start to get turn my torso. When I draw back, I turn to my left. When I draw forward, my shoulders square up towards the direction my face is. That's all fine. I start to get that circular movement with my arm, again in that front coronal plane. So again, here's that pumping motion. I push with my feet to my waist. My waist turns my torso. My torso manifests the movement into my shoulders, to my arms, to my hands. So we try to do this very smooth and fluid. We can start to match our breathing with the exercise. So I would draw in my breath and then exhale. I'm drawing my body back, so I'm drawing the breath in. I'm pushing my body forward, so I'm pushing the breath out and away from my body. So once again, this is demonstrating the movement within the 3 anatomical planes, the tourniquet effect and getting the blood, the energy to pump its way up through the body, and the kinetic linking of being able to adjust and get the power, the speed and the power to come out, manifesting itself in an attack that is what's needed for a self-defense situation or some other kind of physical conflict. So I hope this gives a bit more information on why it's so important to move the body within these three anatomical planes when we exercise. It helps prevent injury, it helps increase the range of motion so you can do different things that normally you might not be able to do. When it unexpectedly comes up, your body has that strength, has the flexibility, has the coordination, and it's also just a very balanced way of exercising. That's it. Take care, be well, stay healthy.